we've been fortunate in Nigeria that, or we were fortunate in Nigeria that by 1960, we didn't go the way some other countries went. We didn't experience an armed struggle for independence, so to say.
Okay.
And that was a blessing and maybe also a curse.
Really?
Yes, because we virtually got independence on a platter of gold, unlike some other countries that really had to fight
for it.
Yes, fight for it. And so I think we where it has become a curse, or where it became a curse, was then we took it for granted, and also maybe we were not mature enough politically.
Really?
The consciousness, yes, the political consciousness, the ruling class at that point in time didn't realize that being independent meant totally breaking away, having a mindset that it could decolonize the mindset, okay? And then you had to have goals for your own progress and so on and so forth. So I think our leaders at that point in time didn't have that maturity, and the colonial master exploited those differences, our differences.
Let's begin this conversation taking our quote from Chinwe Achebe, Nigerian novelist, poet, and critic who is regarded as the dominant figure of modern African literature. He once said, "Nigeria is what it is because its leaders are not what they should be." Okay. My next quote is from Tara Fela Durotoye, Nigerian beauty entrepreneur and lawyer. She once said, "What we need now is a nation of great people who live to positively impact others and build enduring legacies." Absolutely spot on. My last quote is from Frank Herbert, who was an American science fiction author best known for the 1965 novel Dune and its 5 sequels. One said, "Empires do not suffer emptiness of purpose at the time of their creation. It is when they have become established that aims are lost and replaced by vague ritual." Now let's see how this quote relates to what we'll be discussing today. Very warm greetings and welcome to The Conversation. We are reaching you from KAFTAN's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. I am Annabelle Oji. Today, Nigeria as an independent sovereign national clock 63. Hooray! So, on behalf of every KAFTAN TV staff here in Abuja, Lagos, and Ondo studios, here's wishing you, our very esteemed viewers and followers in Nigeria and its diaspora, a very happy Independence Day celebration. We love, cherish, and appreciate you so much, and we do not say that lightly. Happy Independence Day to you all. Now that said, on The Conversation today, we will be looking at Nigeria at 63 years of independence. What gives? Before we kickstart that conversation, let's have a better understanding of independence and what it means to be independent. Now, according to the Oxford Dictionary, the word independence is the fact or state of being independent. Now, being independent simply means free from outside control, not subject to another's authority. That's according to the Oxford Dictionary. But according to Cambridge Dictionary, says being independent means not taking help or money from other people. Help, money, and people were underlined. But then, the question is, are we, as a country, are we truly independent? Let me leave that question to you. On 1st October 1960, Nigeria officially declared its independence from the United Kingdom. In his speech, then Prime Minister Abubakar Tafawa Balewa said, end quote, "When this day is in October 1960 was chosen for our independence, it seemed that we were destined to move with quiet dignity to our place on the world stage." He further stated that recent events have changed the scene beyond recognition, so that we find ourselves today being tested to the utmost. He continued by saying that we are called upon immediately to show that our claims to responsible government are well-founded and having been accepted as an independent state, we must at once play an active part in maintaining the peace of the world and in preserving civilization. He added that I promise you, we shall not fail for want of determination, and we come to this task better equipped than many. End of quote. Now, in the 63 years since Nigerians have created a huge impact on the world, grown to become Africa's largest economy, and today it is the most populous black nation on earth. Roger that. But that doesn't mean that Nigeria has not had its brawls. Nigeria has had several coups, a civil war, ethnic clashes, and the country is still dealing with corruption, an over 10-year battle with the terrorist organization Boko Haram, ISWAP, kidnapping, just to mention a few. One thing that has survived all of these glitches is the resilience of the Nigerian people. Over the country's 63 years history, people have constantly demonstrated strength and the will to surmount the most daunting challenges, and that is worth celebrating. That's it again. My guest on the show today is Dr. Shehu Emman, who is Director, International Institute of Journalism, I beg your pardon, that's IIJ here in Abuja. And he will be sharing his thoughts on the state of Nigeria and Nigeria's independence at 63. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to D's Conversation, especially the special episode of D Conversation with my guest, Dr. Shehu Emman. I will see you after this time out. So, like I always say, go get your cup of coffee, go get your, Cocoa and Co say that pap and akara works better for you, go get it and let's have this conversation with Dr. Shehu. Welcome to D Conversation. Welcome back. If you just joined us, this is The Conversation. We are reaching you from KAFTAN's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. Now we'll go straight to our conversation for today. And my guest is Dr. Shehu Emman, who is the Director of International Institute of Journalism. It's great to have you on the show today, sir.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. And
Except I'm not wearing my kaftan.
No, this one is KAFTAN. Happy Independence Day to you.
Same to you.
Great. All right. Now, so Nigeria at 63, despite all that Nigeria has been through, even recently and before now, there are still things, some people will say, yes, there are things that we should be grateful about. But then some other persons will say, what are you grateful for? So now looking back at all that Nigeria has gone through over the years, over the decades, what are you personally grateful for?
Well, I'm grateful for the fact that Nigeria is still Nigeria. In 63 years, we've experienced so much. We've experienced a civil war. We've had 3 types of rulership, so to say. We've had colonial rule, we've had civilian rule, and we've had military rule. So it's been a mixed bag as a result of all these experiences. But the fact that Nigeria is still here gives us the hope that Nigeria will, let me speak like a pastor, will fulfill her destiny.
All right, so then do you actually think that there are reasons, or there are good reasons why we should either celebrate? Some people say we should just be commemorating and not celebrating. Either way, do we have reasons to?
We have a lot of reasons to celebrate. Whether we like it or not, Nigeria's potential is recognized outside of Nigeria. So if we start with the most current thing, which is our music is making a global impact and creating a much needed impact in terms of our own contribution to the global entertainment scene. Our film industry is in the top 3 in the world, even though we know we can do a lot better than what we're doing at the moment. Our fashion is also making waves, and our people are making waves generally. as a people, we are making waves abroad. If you go to the United States of America, I think our ethnic base in terms of non-American communities in the United States of America were regarded as the most educated. So there are positives. There are positives to look at, and there's reason to celebrate. When Nigerians perform on the global stage, if you take Israel Adesanya or any of those wrestlers or boxers or sportswomen, Tobias Musa. I mean, look at when Tobias Musa set a world record. The whole world was excited because of her performance and what she achieved by that performance. So our literature is also of global status. So there's a lot to celebrate, but we can do a lot better.
But I keep hearing you talk about entertainment, food, literature. How about politics?
But that is what it does. That is what is us. That is our identity. We can't run away. They may look simplistic. They may look superficial, but they are not. Those are the things that establish our identity. Our food. Generally, that's our culture. Those are the things that make our culture. Politics. Yes, every country has problems with its politics. And as I keep telling people, we usually say Nigeria is a mere geographical expression. Let's face the reality. There is no country that is not a mere geographical expression. By reasons of migration, by reasons of conquest, which is what I've mentioned here. We've had colonial rule. We know what happened at the Berlin Conference that has, in a way, created the contemporary history of Africa. But it's the same thing with every other country. Go and look at any other country anywhere in the world. It's the same history of migrations. It's the same history of conquests. And people, those countries have emerged as a result of those things that have happened to them. And they've been able to create their own identities and create a means of administrating themselves. Of creating administrations for themselves. Okay. So we're grappling with politics for the basic reasons that I've mentioned before. We've gone from colonial rule to civil rule or being independent. So we've had to, from civil rule, we've gone to military rule, and we're back to civilian rule. And all these changes have necessitated policy somersaults, changes in our constitutions, trying to understand what is the best way forward for us. We've also had to contend with understanding who we are as a people and what is the best way for us to achieve success. And it's not easy. Okay, 63 years is child's play when you consider that some countries have existed in the current status for over 200 years.
Okay, so because I hear you talk about how we've moved or we've transited from military to democracy and then back to... we'll definitely talk about that, especially with regards to these current coups that you see going on. And then according to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, he described it as contagious autocracy. We'll talk about that later on as we continue. But then there has been this argument over time on what exactly when exactly Nigeria gained her independence. Some say it's 1960, some others say that it is 1963, because even when the colonial masters said that they have granted Africa's most populous nation her independence, the Queen was still like the head of the state at that time. And Nnamdi Azikiwe, who we hail as Nigeria's first indigenous governor general, still had to report matters on the state of the nation to the Queen until 1963. So when Nigeria evolved into, that's when Nigeria evolved into a republic. So help us demystify this argument then.
Well, every country that is colonized gets to a point when the people realize that they can do without the colonial master. And then they become independent, whether by having a tete-a-tete, a round table conference, and then they agree amicably that, okay, we'll allow you to be independent, or by use of force when the people rebel and take up arms and force out the colonial master. We've been fortunate in Nigeria that, or we were fortunate in Nigeria that by 1960, we didn't go the way some other countries went. We didn't experience an armed struggle for independence, so to say.
Okay.
And that was a blessing and maybe also a curse.
Ah, really?
Yes, because we virtually got independence on a platter of gold, unlike some other countries that really had to fight.
Fight for it.
Yes, fight for it. And so I think we where it has become a curse, or where it became a curse, was then we took it for granted. Also maybe we were not mature enough politically.
Oh, really?
The consciousness, yes, the political consciousness, the ruling class at that point in time didn't realize that being independent meant totally breaking away, having a mindset that it could decolonize the mindset, okay? And then you had to have goals for your own progress and so on and so forth. So I think our leaders at that point in time didn't have that maturity, and the colonial master exploited those differences, our differences.
So that challenge is from our leaders?
Yeah, it's from our leaders. They lacked the understanding of what unity can do for a country, and allowed the divide and rule, neo-colonial tactics of the colonial master, or the former colonial master, creep in, and that affected our mindset and has continued to affect our mindset, because a lot of doubts and fears were sown from that period. We've always doubted ourselves. In the north, there was indirect rule. In the south, direct rule. And you tell the people in the north, be careful of those people in the south. They tell the people in the south, be careful of those people in the north. So basically, instead of creating a harmonious environment, we allowed those fears to becloud whatever we were doing. And of course, that led to the Civil War, eventually led to the Civil War. And the scars of the Civil War have still not gone away. So those fears, suspicions, distrust, mistrust, they're still there, making it difficult for us to work harmoniously as a country.
Now, taking a cue from what you just said and where you just landed, I understand that we cannot celebrate Nigeria's independence at 63 without also celebrating our over 2 decades of uninterrupted democratic rule. In the 6 decades, so Nigeria has gone through the independent route. We've also had, like you stated before, the military and then the democratic rule. So if we have to make comparative analysis of the 4 decades of military rule and then the over 2 decades of democratic rule, would you say that we have made progress really, or are we still work in progress, especially judging from the recent coups? And then you find out that most African countries still have that, we want military, we want that. Look at what's going on in Gabon. You talk about Niger, you go to Equatorial Guinea, you go talk about Cameroon. Have we made progress?
We're a work in progress. I would rather say we are a work in progress, and every country is a work in progress. From America to Britain to the developing countries like us, to use their own language, every country is a work in progress, depending on what your goals are, depending on what your objectives are. If we look at where we've come from colonial rule to independence, to the Civil War, to the military rules, and to where we are today, we're a work in progress. There's no doubt about it. We cannot overlook the fact that there are positive contributions that the military made in terms of some of the infrastructure that have kept us as a better country than some of our neighboring countries. Were achieved by the military. We cannot we cannot throw that away, you know, in spite of the negatives of the military rule. The downside of the military rule is that it's giving us, within our own country, it's giving us, there's a kind of toxic behavior that has come from military rule that has seeped into the society. Some kind of brazenness, disregard for authority, which I think has come from our years of the experiences we had in military, where things were done by force, you know, and it didn't matter, you know, just people just use force because of that military mentality. We've not been able to get away from that. It's still here. It's become part of us. So now we disregard any form of law. We have no respect for the rule of law. Once you can find your way around the policies, that's okay. It's fine with you. But you see, that's a major problem we have, which leads us to the other issue of awareness, especially political awareness.
Okay.
So the kind of politics we play, it's supposed to be politics on a democratic platform where people vote for candidates of their choice, and then hopefully those candidates have a vision and would then be able to implement the vision to the satisfaction of the people. But there's a disconnect, as far as I'm concerned. We don't have a process that is entirely clean, so to say. Our political process is not clean. We're still struggling with credibility of the political process, which also means that in the minds of people, because the process is not credible, they've grown very pessimistic about the political process. And therefore, you discover people who, if their party doesn't win, they don't mind if there's a coup. Because they feel this is what will redress this. Let's scatter everything and start all over again. So you will not be surprised that even as coups are taking place in neighboring countries, there are people in Nigeria who are saying, let's have a coup. Because
they feel disgruntled.
Because they feel disgruntled or disillusioned that the recent elections haven't gone
their own way.
So it's part of the burden of developing countries, especially in Africa. We have the challenge of making our political process credible. We also have the challenge of having politicians, since they are the ones who constitute the ruling class, of politicians who actually have concern for the society. They are not just coming there to enrich themselves, which is a major mistake we've made. We've prioritized politics in such a way that it has become a means of employment rather than a means of service to the people. So it doesn't matter whether you have a vision or not, just be able to win the elections by hook or by crook. And that's why it's become very, very contentious, because people want to win at all costs. It doesn't matter, by hook or by crook, I must get into the Senate. By hook or by crook, I must get into the House of Representatives. By hook or by crook, I must be in the state assembly. I must be a governor. Mechetera, as a brother would say. Okay, so that is something we need to address. We need to find a way of recalibrating the way our political system is, so that people who are actually committed towards serving can get in there, and not a situation where we have more charlatans in positions of governance.
Okay, so now with what you've just stated, now I recall, like I said before, where President Bola Ahmed Tinubu said that this coup is like contagious autocracy. So he, and then I had a guest who said the man at Aso Rock, I'm sure he's referring to President Tinubu, that probably he's scared, or he needs to be scared, that this contagious autocracy that is on the rise could actually come to Nigeria. So maybe that's the reason why you have the president of Rwanda decide to change his military armaments. Maybe that's the reason why you have the president of Cameroon also do the same thing. So do you actually see that happening, especially in Nigeria?
Coups can happen anywhere. Even Trump tried to stage a coup in America. I mean, what he did after the elections, when it was clear he had lost, was a coup, which was nipped in the bud because the system made it possible to nip that in the bud. So coups can happen anywhere. It depends on the structures in the society, whether the structures can contain the coup, or whether people are disenchanted to the point where they can allow it to happen as a way of resetting the system. Coups can happen anywhere. So
it's a matter of what the people allow.
Yeah, it's a matter of what the people. If the people in Niger, for instance, if the supporters of the man who had been removed had the upper hand of being able to go out on the streets, the coup would not have happened. But the guys who got in were clever enough to play on certain emotions, like the influence of the colonial master, and got the people on their side. So it's a matter of what the people allow.
So now here, I was in a particular symposium where I heard Professor Michael Zikome say that some African leaders, or West African leaders, they just believe that the sun rises and sets in their own home. So why do you always have one person wants to stay there forever? And then it looks as if, when we're saying these things, it looks as if it only happens outside, like it doesn't happen here in Nigeria. But you yet have governors who, they are not feeling well, but they still want to stay there and tell you that they would finish their term or their tenure before they leave. So why do we have this sit-tight mentality, especially from West African leaders? Because
we've not been able to evolve from our understanding of leadership from the traditional template. Traditionally, our understanding of leadership is you're like a chief. You get into the position, you never leave that position until you die. Or if there are greater authorities that can depose you, you are deposed and removed and sent on exile. So we've not been able to understand that contemporary leadership is not the same as traditional leadership. And of course, we have a followership that is virtually, I won't say hypocritical, but the sycophancy of followers. So once you are there, you're virtually like a god, small g. They worship you, you become a deity, like the traditional chief. And so they massage your ego, and you can't imagine yourself without that kind of power. What would you do without that kind? So we've not been able to move from understanding leadership in the traditional sense and leadership in the contemporary sense. Okay. That's why we have that problem.
So we're actually due for a break, but before we go on that break, I'm going to ask you two questions and I'd like you to unbundle them in one breath, because you talked about the traditional and the contemporary leadership. I hear a lot of people say that. I think it's even better we go back to the era of traditional rulers, where we had traditional leaders who, that's what we should just do and just leave all this presidential and all. Do you agree with that argument? That's one on the side. And then secondly, I know that you're always teaching us about how much the global south, they've decided to take on a lot of countries. But then you hear people will say that the reason why some of these countries, the global north, I beg your pardon, the reason why some of these countries were brought down is because they allowed their colonial masters to bring them down. And do you agree that that's actually the problem here? The global north pinning people down.
Let me start with, we can't go back to traditional leadership or traditional system of governance. It's too late in the day for us to be able to do that. How are you going to do it? It's like people saying we should go back to regional status. And I've been laughing at this whole thing of regional status. So we had 3 regions in Nigeria, and then we evolved to 12 states, then we evolved to 20-something, and today we are in 36. And now you are telling us we should reverse and go back to 3 regions. So how are you even going to govern? You are going to tell the man in Zamfara to go back to old Sokoto state. You are going to tell the man in Ebonyi to go back to old Enugu, the old structure of Enugu. How are you even going to arrange the governance? You know, and that has always been my argument. The whole idea of unbundling that regional structure was to bring governance closer to the people. So in the same breath, how are you going to go back to traditional leadership? You're going to go back where it's the Sultan who rules over what, the Sultanate? Is that what you want? You understand what I'm saying? And then in areas that didn't have traditional rulers, are you going to now revoke the titles you have given these people? So you want to treat them the way Wike treated his traditional rulers in River State, when he's, you know, the way he berated them in public and whatever. It's too late. We can't go back there. We're evolving, and that's what we should be concerned about: improving our governance in the contemporary context, meeting our own demands. Yes, the Global North will always dominate because they control technology. They because they control technology, they therefore control almost every aspect of existence. And of course, they do not want to lose the control they have over the rest of it. Nobody wants to lose the control of what he has. So this amorphous empire that they've been able to create through the United Nations gives them an opportunity, yes, to continue to determine what happens in the rest of the world. It's for us in the Global South to have an understanding and find ways of being truly independent.
Being truly independent. We're going to kickstart from that where he just landed. And clearly there's a lot to unbundle from this conversation with Dr. Shehu, and we will get right into it after this time out. Join us again.
So let me give you an example that is playing out right now. Ukraine is fighting a war, an existentialist war of survival. And yet in the midst of this war, they are also fighting corruption. Are we aware of that? They are fighting corruption to the extent that they are even sacking, right in the middle of war, officials that have been found to be corrupt in one way or the other. So I've used an extreme example, which is Ukraine, which is not an African country. It is not even a neighbor of Nigeria. It's in far away Eastern Europe. And it's in the midst of a war, and yet there is the consciousness that we must sanitize our system. Going forward, we must sanitize our system, because they know that corruption has played a part in the situation that they found themselves in. In Nigeria, we tend to justify corruption, except when it doesn't suit us. 13th commandment, if you can, once you can do it and you are not caught, that's fine. So until we erase that mentality of the 13th commandment, of it doesn't matter, just make sure you are not caught.
You're not caught.
So it's also hypocritical when we keep saying, this person, he stole all that money and whatever. What of this morning that you came out and you threw that orange peel on the street? It's a corrupt behavior, because you are not supposed to do that on the highway.
if you just joined us, this is The Conversation, reaching you from KAFTAN's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. If you just joined us, you've actually missed out on a whole lot, but then you can still join in the conversation. As my guest on the show today is Dr. Emman Shehu, who is Director, International Institute of Journalism here in Abuja. All right, before I went on that break, you've actually said quite a number of interesting things, but now let's take a cue from where you landed. Now, someone said that the problem of Nigeria started from the amalgamation of the northern and the southern protectorate, and of course, that's according to him, he said, is the forceful binding people together as since then up until now, the three largest ethnic groups have been struggling to live in harmony because they always have their fundamental differences in values, in worldviews, and that's beyond the obvious language or clothing or marital distinctions. And he also even reminded me of how when you had Michael Okpara being the premier of the eastern Nigeria, and then you had Chief Obafemi Awolowo, the first premier of the western region, and then you also had Ahmadu Bello in the northern part, God bless their souls. So, and then he said that these men, they did great when they were together. So according to him, he said, please, let's just divide and rule. Let's go back to that region. Do you subscribe to it?
No, we're going to go back to regions. We can't go back to regions. We're a country that is evolving, and in the evolution of every country, you go through difficulties. If you take the United States of America, the United States of America is not made up of the same people, has never been made up of the same people, will never be made up of the same people. They have their difficulties, they have their challenges, they find a way politically, constitutionally, to solve their problems. Problems will never go away, but problems are meant to be solved. It is defeatist when, because there is a problem, you surrender and then you go back to a default setting that is no longer relevant. Why am I saying this? Using America still as an example, you first had the indigenous people who were conquered by the whites who came first from England, and then other people that came from various parts of the world to make what we know today is America. And they've had their tensions, they've had their problems, they've had their difficulties, their divisions. But they're always finding a way, knowing that for the country to progress, they need to solve those problems constitutionally. So that today, where you have a situation where even an American president has been called a Russian asset, an asset of an enemy of the country, still they are still finding, they've still found a way to solve the problem without killing themselves. You understand what I'm saying? Or without saying, let us break up America. In fact, if possible, America wants to even annex more territories to the 50 states that make up America. So to come back to our own reality, I've said it from the beginning. People will say amalgamation, which is an extension of that other word of we are mere geographical expression. Please, which other country that has been colonized in West Africa did not experience that kind of amalgamation, of bringing, because amalgamation is you merge people together. So which other country in Africa that has experienced colonial rule from the Berlin Conference, because it was the Berlin Conference of 1885 that created these territories as we know them now. They created mergers. People who were not together were forced to stay together, okay? And that is the history of every country. I've said it from the beginning. The history of every country is the history of migrations. If you listen, even go back to your community, you will hear your people say, we came from Egypt. Isn't it? You hear folktales who say, we came from Egypt, we came from here, we came. So it means there have been migrations.
True.
There have been migrations, and people have come from left, right, and center, have come to a place, have formed what we now understand is a country. So to to say go back to the regional whatever, it's not only defeatist, it's also an insult to the other ethnicities in Nigeria. Because people who talk like that think that it's only Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba that exists in Nigeria. And that's the most myopic way of thinking. Even within Eastern Nigeria, or what was the old Eastern Nigeria, you had other ethnicities. It wasn't just an Igbo domain. Okay, so for somebody to say, hey, let us go back, is to look for an easy way out that is actually not an easy way out. It's an escapist route that doesn't lead anywhere. The reality is this is where we are, and we have to, what are the challenges? And we have to face up to the challenges and find solution to the challenges. If we are able to create a system that is fair to all, okay, that is fair to all, that's how I would want to summarize. We're able to create a system that is fair to all, a lot of these tensions would not be there. Okay, that is number one. A lot of these tensions will not be there. But people are even becoming more aware that a lot of all this talk about unfairness is actually a manipulation by the political class. Because when they are up there in the Senate, in the House of Assembly, or in their boardrooms, taking their decisions, they don't look at their ethnicities. They don't look at their religious differences. Okay, or their gender differences. They are busy about sharing the contracts and other things and other things like that. They are not concerned. They only do that when they lose out, and then they come and say, "Oh, see, they are doing this to me because I'm this and that," which even is the greater problem of the top three in the country, because we suffocate the remaining ethnicities in the country. Yeah, oh really? We don't even give them a chance.
Ah, okay. So I keep getting, we keep getting social media statements, and then someone even sent and then said, after all, look at Russia. They have different countries, and they're doing well. And there's other person came out to argue with regard to Brexit. So you still have people who,
people who always feel when they lose out. I mean, why do you have nationalists tendencies in some of these European countries? It's because sometimes they feel they're losing out, like the indigenous in quotes, because okay, so we are English, we are British, we are here. People are coming from outside, not just from Africa, but from other European countries, and coming and taking up our jobs. So then this whole thing about we must protect, that's why you have Brexit, we must protect our own whatever. When you don't want to do that job, other people will come and do the job. You understand what I'm saying? So it's the same thing. Those nationalist tendencies are similar to people who say, oh, let us break Nigeria, let us go back to old regions. Old regions that contain only Hausa, Igbo, and Yoruba, old regions that contain all the ethnicities that make up Nigeria now. So it's the same way that you also suppress, when you go back to the old regions, you suppress the other ethnicities. Is it not for the same reason that states were created, so that the other people who did not have a chance would have an opportunity to also breathe?
Have an opportunity to breathe. And then you recall that during the elections, these matters were what they used to further divide us. You hear some people talk about restructuring. Yes. You hear some people talk about returning the overhauling the constitution, or completely and taking some things out. And then you just begin to wonder, so how do we then come back to become that one Nigeria? I hear you say that everyone should get what they want. Is it via the constitution?
No, well, maybe through the constitution, but also having policies, even not the constitution, policies that address our problems, our challenges. If I would refer to the present problem that we have, the present economic problem that we have, we've had in the previous administration, a decision was taken, for instance, to close the borders. Okay, and you know that was turned into an ethnic thing, that the borders in the north, where you understand what I'm saying. Meanwhile, we know there are porous borders all over. I mean, there was evidence that smuggling was still going on all over the borders of the country. But look at the messaging that was made that, oh, northern borders were not closed. So the smuggling continued in the
north.
So if we continue to short circuit our policies with that negative attitude, it will be difficult for us to progress. But at the same time, the challenge also is for people in governance to recalibrate policies in such a way that the policies are above board, the policies are for the common good and not for a certain section of the society. That is the way we can make progress. But I still go back to whatever we do, let's be fair to ourselves. You know, let's not ethnicize our policies. So we still have a challenge where in the previous administration, it was, okay, the man is only appointing people from his own side. Then in the present administration, it's his own boys, his own people. In the one before that, during Jonathan thing, oh, it's the other ethnic group that made it possible for him. So our leaders also have to be sensitive to these kind of things and try to be fair to everybody. And I think that is going to eventually trickle down, and people will see the need for fairness. Because if we're fair to ourselves, we're going to see that the common good is better than trying to split up everything, because then it will create more problems. I mean, Nigeria is a country, forget about the dominance of the top three. We are over 300, we have over 300 languages, which is a reflection of the ethnicities that we have in Nigeria. So if we are going to go and be like children who, because they didn't get the toy to play with, and say, okay, scatter everything, we are going to become over 300 geographical expressions.
All right, now let's divert a little bit and talk about human rights and the Nigerian police, even though I know that they are two different sectors. But judging from the days of Gani Fawemi, judging from the days of Olufemilayo Ransom Kuti or Fela Anikulapo Kuti or the Ken Saro-Wiwas, who were always at the forefront to press home their demands, would you actually say that what we have now is true activism to put an end to all forms of human rights violations, employer and trade unionisms, or are we actually crossing the T's and dotting the real I's and not politicizing it?
I think part of the problem with activism at the moment is maybe it's always been there, but it's not as pronounced as it is now, where it has become more of people using activism as a way of surviving, so to say. So the whole NGO syndrome there's a particular NGO in this country that is always, every week, it will sue the federal government. I
think I know who you're talking to.
They will sue the federal government. So it has become so ridiculous that you now say, what is this all about? Are they doing this to justify the funding they get from abroad? Okay. You are suing every week. You are suing every week. You are suing every week. You are suing one thing or the other that government has done. It doesn't make sense.
Or the president has done.
Or what the president has done, or what the federal government has done. You're always suing, and it becomes ridiculous. But I've used that as an extreme example of what activism has become today. So it's sometimes difficult to tell if the activism is genuine, it's being done because the cause is just, or it's being done because something else is going on behind the scenes. And you know, for this same reason, the Labour Congress, for instance, has lost a lot of its credibility in the eyes of the ordinary Nigerian, because the feeling is that gradually the Labour Congress has become more of people who bargain for their own interests rather than for the interest of the populace, and so their credibility level has gone down. And so it's this, in the same vein, the credibility level of activists have gone down, because people think, oh, they're only doing it because the person involved is involved with them in one way or the other, either in terms of ethnicity or class or just something. There's a connection. This is why there's an uproar. They are trying to create an uproar in support of this cause. So a lot of the genuineness in activism has sadly dissipated. People tend to now say, okay, maybe they are doing it for what can go into their pockets.
All right, now let's talk about corruption. Most people will argue that even the Britons that actually colonized us, they have some level of corruption. So definitely we learned from the best. That's what I hear people say. So, but most of the advanced nations have been able to deal with their own, at least to an extent. That's why they keep talking about or emphasizing on building great institutions better than building great men. Now, looking at how much corruption has eaten deep into every fabric of our very own society, from monkeys and snakes or termites eating up monies with so much relish. And with all of this, are there still hope for Nigeria fighting corruption, fighting oil thieves? And then you talked about nepotism at some point, and then fighting all of this headlong. First of all,
I hope the monkeys and termites and whatever eating one is a metaphor. I hope it's not. Anyway, so to start with, corruption it's part of human existence, and you find corruption in every society. In every country, the problem of corruption is a reality. So let me give you an example that is playing out right now. Ukraine is fighting a war, an existentialist war of survival. And yet, in the midst of this war, they are also fighting corruption. Are we aware of that? They are fighting corruption to the extent that they are even sacking, right in the middle of war, officials that have been found to be corrupt in one way or the other. So I've used an extreme example, which is Ukraine, which is not an African country. It is not even a neighbor of Nigeria. It's in far away Eastern Europe. And it's in the midst of a war. And yet there is the consciousness that we must sanitize our system going forward. We must sanitize our system, because they know that corruption has played a part in the situation that they found themselves in. In Nigeria, we tend to justify corruption, except when it doesn't suit us. So corruption is not only with the stealing of government property, stealing of government money, padding the budgets, misappropriating funds, local government funds that are meant for the local governments, and the state's governors would divert them and whatever. Corruption is when you give that bribe. So it starts from you as the whatever. If you are corrupt, you are part of the society. That means you're also encouraging corruption. Corruption is when you give money to pass exams. Okay, you give money to pass exams. It's corruption. Corruption is when you break. Instead of stopping at the traffic lights, the light says red, stop. You beat the traffic light. It's corruption. So until we recognize the fact that we all encourage corruption one way or the other because we want to beat the system, because if you can do it and get away with it, the 13th commandment, if you can, once you can do it and you are not caught, that's fine. So until we erase that mentality of the 13th commandment of it doesn't matter, just make sure you are not caught.
You're not caught.
So it's also hypocritical when we keep saying, this person, he stole all that money and whatever. What of this morning that you came out and you threw that orange peel on the street. It's a corrupt behavior because you are not supposed to do that. On the highway, you throw out a can of soft drink. Meanwhile, if you go abroad, you will not do it because you know you'll be penalized. You pay a price. So until we are ready to come to terms with the fact that eradicating corruption starts with us. It starts with the individual. We have a major problem. We have a major problem. And that is why people thrive. People go in, and when you become, Annabelle now becomes House of Representative member. The expectation,
I think I like it here, though.
No, your own Annabelle.
I like it here.
No. Your people will force you to go there. When you go there, they will say, Annabelle, now we have arrived. And you know what that language means? It's the language of corruption. You have arrived. We have arrived.
Begin to share the national cake.
It is our own turn. God has put you there for us.
Exactly.
So we even speak in the language of corruption. So until we are ready to address those change that mindset, we have a problem. And that is why you have abandoned projects all over the country. White elephant projects and abandoned projects. And one of the most criminal things we have in this country is the amount of projects that have been abandoned. So much money has gone into these projects. Another administration comes, forgets about it, and because they are looking for ways in which they can siphon funds through projects instead of finishing the existing ones. And then when you finish those ones, if there are others you want to do, then you can do. So I ask people, just go and Google abandoned projects in Nigeria. You'll be shocked. You'll be shocked.
Wow. All right. So our time is fast spent. But before we let you go, since we're celebrating Nigeria at 63, let's get your last words to Nigerians, not only to the leaders, but to that one who you talked about, who might just come out of his house or her house and then just throw a banana peel outside, reminding them that, yes, you are also corrupt. So let's get your last word to Nigerians.
My last word is Nigeria is a work in progress. And the only way this work in progress will progress is for every Nigerian, every citizen to see himself or herself as part of the work in progress. Happy Independence Day.
What a fine way to end this conversation. Thank you so much, Dr. Shehu Emman. It's a pleasure having this talk with you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for coming again.
Thank you.
All right, viewers, that's where we end this conversation for today, the Independence Day special. It's been a wonderful time having this conversation with Dr. Emman Shehu, who is Director, International Institute of Journalism. And it's been a wonderful time here on The Conversation. And I'm sure you heard all that he said. It begins with you fighting corruption. Start with yourself and then your family members before you come out to throw shades. Remember, when you throw stones, ask yourself, am I living in the glass house? I'll see you next time. My name is Annabelle Oji. God bless you and yours. God bless Nigeria and happy Independence Day.